Going into Austria, Helmut Marko, like he usually does, was making wild comments that set the paddock alight on the Inside Line podcast, which I highly recommend for you to check out because, as you can imagine, Helmut Marko is pretty much a quote machine with everything that he says. He was asked if him and Christian Horner have ever disagreed on drivers, with his response being, "Not often, but sometimes we do. The last one, I would say, is Nyck de Vries, and at the moment, I would say that he's right. He was not a fan of Nyck de Vries." Rightly so, these comments got a hell of a lot of attention on social media, and de Vries himself in the build-up to Austria was asked to give his reaction to hearing Marko's comments. I think Dr. Helmut Marko would appreciate if I proved him wrong on track. That's all I kind of feel about it and is within my control. I think whenever you are trying harder or trying to force something that is not kind of ready, then it won't happen, and then mistakes will happen. So I think the key is just to continue as we are and continue to focus on the job, remain patient, and then I think the potential is there, so it's just a matter of time for things to come together. Helmut Marko's comments to me just seemed totally unnecessary, and to be honest, kind of out of bounds. I know that he was referring to Christian Horner when he was saying that picking up de Vries was a mistake, but by then saying that it looks like he was right, he's admitting that he also feels like that right now. The problem is that these kinds of hindsight comments about it was a mistake to pick up this driver and emphasis on the word was are fine when you've already dropped the driver, but de Vries is still driving. If you follow me on Instagram, then you would know that I was lucky enough to go to the Austrian Grand Prix myself, and so trust me when I say that I saw Nyck de Vries with my own eyes, still driving for AlphaTauri, and so in what world is it good to basically hear your boss say that you're not good enough to work for them whilst you're still working for them? And now, don't get me wrong, I get how Red Bull work. It seems like, unless your name is Max Verstappen, the only support you're going to get is negative encouragement, but all Nyck has had since the start of the season is criticism from fans like me, criticism from the media, criticism online, and now open criticism from his own team. Clearly the kick up the backside approach or the knife in the back approach is just not working. And now, granted, I do think Nyck has made progress even if it has been minimal. The crashes seem to have gone away. Over one lap in the last 3 races he's outqualified Yuki once, and his average deficit has only been just over a tenth. But it's the races that have really let him down. K-Mag after the race talked about how de Vries is driving like a desperate man who looks under pressure, and honestly I couldn't have said it better. Their 2 incidents in Canada and Austria were exactly that, signs of a driver who's feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, and when he's getting overtaken, he just can't let it go even when the fight is lost. However, that is why I don't really understand the point of kicking him even more when he's down by Marko. Surely if it looks like he's going to lose his seat anyway, then maybe try going in the other direction and try to support him, because ultimately the worst that can happen is exactly where we are right now. I also don't think the de Vries situation has been helped by AlphaTauri becoming the worst car on the grid. Since the Williams upgrades in Canada, in the hands of Alex at least, the car is definitely better than the AlphaTauri, and even Logan Sargent, despite not scoring points, had possibly his best race yet in Austria, having also now got the upgrades. AlphaTauri are currently last in the Constructors' Championship, and that's very significant. On one hand, Red Bull will be looking at the situation and thinking that they need to get in a driver who will get more out of the car and will help the team get out of last place. But on the other hand, de Vries isn't struggling in a decent midfield car, he is struggling in what now is the worst car on the grid, and so you've got to take into account and consider how much of his struggles are down to him and how much of it is genuinely down to the car. The bottom line is that when you look at how blatantly obvious it is that Red Bull have become disillusioned with Nyck de Vries, it makes it pretty clear that with the options that they have in reserve, which we'll talk about in a minute, Nyck de Vries has 3 races to basically save his F1 career. Silverstone, Hungary, and Spa are the 3 remaining races before the summer break, and as we saw in 2019, Red Bull are more than capable of pulling the trigger on a mid-season driver swap. The drivers who are most likely to replace De Vries are Liam Lawson, who's currently racing in Super Formula and sits second in that championship, and Daniel Ricciardo, who is currently spending a year on the sidelines as Red Bull's test and reserve driver. And now, on paper, Lawson is by far the most straightforward option. He is a young Red Bull junior, he has been a race winner and title contender in pretty much every championship he's ever competed in, and he deserves an opportunity in what is a team designed to give Red Bull juniors a chance. Ricciardo in the background does complicate things, however. It's pretty obvious that long-term Ricciardo is gunning for Checo's seat at Red Bull. In terms of Checo himself, it's always difficult to know how much security he actually has, despite the fact that he has a contract for 2024. When it comes to Christian Horner, it almost seems like his faith in Checo is changing not just from race to race, but from session to session. Now, in fairness, Horner has stated that the talks of Checo being replaced are all wide of the mark, but after the whole Gasly situation in 2019, I don't really take anything that Horner says as fact, and so whilst that is the official line, I don't think that any driver is ever really safe at Red Bull. After the British Grand Prix, Ricciardo is going to be driving the 2023 RB19 during the official Silverstone Pirelli tyre test. And now, Red Bull has already come out and used the word evaluation when referring to this test, so make no mistake, this is going to be a serious look into whether Ricciardo could get back into Formula 1 and into the AlphaTauri this season. In the long term, however, if you're giving Ricciardo a seat at AlphaTauri ahead of a Red Bull Junior, it means that you're at least half considering him as an option at Red Bull in place of Checo. And so, not only will the test be used to evaluate Ricciardo's current form, but it's also going to be used in back-to-back comparisons to what Checo will have just done during the British Grand Prix in the same car. There are so many moving pieces here that it's not as simple as just saying, will De Vries finish the season or not? If you put Lawson in that AlphaTauri, then it's just a young Red Bull Junior getting his chance early. If you put Ricciardo in, it's clearly to see how competitive he still is outside of McLaren, and if Checo then has a shaky end to 2023 and somehow finishes behind Alonso in the championship as well, then all bets are off at that point. We'll see how the Red Bull element plays out over the coming weeks, because the next 3 races are going to change the F1 career for at least one of those 4 drivers in some way. In terms of Nyck de Vries, I kind of feel in a strange place because I have been super critical of him as the season has gone on, because that's just how I am when I see a driver underperforming relative to expectations. But hearing those comments from Marco and understanding the pressure that's on his shoulders and how much it means for every driver to be in Formula 1, even on a human level, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel sorry for him at the moment. Rightly or wrongly, Helmut Marko has a lot of influence, but it feels like instead of the Red Bull family trying to help De Vries improve, which would ultimately help AlphaTauri, it feels like they're almost so ready to drop him now that they're trying to accelerate his demise. Regardless of how this season ends, and honestly at this point, I think it's actually more likely that he won't be in the car when we get back after the summer break to Zandvoort, I still stand by that De Vries deserved a chance in Formula 1. I will never feel like it was wrong that he was given an opportunity, because when you win Formula 2, Formula E, and deliver on a one-time call-up in a Williams, I don't know how that doesn't warrant at least a chance. I just think that the team that he aligned himself with wasn't the right one. I know that now it's all in hindsight, but Williams were basically ready to give him a contract on the spot after Monza, and even though he would have been up against arguably an even tougher teammate in Albon, and maybe even in a worse car in the Williams, I think looking now at how James Vowles is talking about Logan Sargeant, despite his struggles, I think the Williams environment would have been more understanding and more supporting during these early season struggles. He chose AlphaTauri because he saw a clearer route into a race-winning car, and looking back, I think he's going to regret that decision. I know that throughout this video, I've talked about De Vries being dropped as if it's basically official news at this point, but in truth, I am going to end this video by saying exactly what I said about De Vries in my last video about him. It ain't over until it's over. De Vries knows the next 3 tracks very well, AlphaTauri are bringing upgrades to their car in Silverstone, and all it takes is one crazy result, even if it is just a P10 finish to at least start building some momentum. De Vries' F1 dream, which right now has turned into a nightmare, is slipping from his fingers, and he has got 3 races to catch it before it's gone. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.